You ever wonder how an organization survives for nearly 1,000 years? I mean, through wars, the fall of empires, the dawn of the modern age, how do they do it? The secret, it turns out, is adaptation, constant, relentless reinvention. And let me tell you, no one has mastered this art quite like the Knights of Malta.
Okay, so get this. Their full name is it's a mouthful. The Sovereign Military Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes, and of Malta. But here's the cool part. That name isn't just a title. It's literally a map of their 1,000-year-long story. And today, we're going to follow that incredible journey, one name at a time.
So our journey starts in a pretty surprising place. Not on a battlefield, but in a hospital. We're talking 11th century Jerusalem, where a group of monks had a simple, compassionate mission: to take care of sick pilgrims in the Holy City.
What began as this small hospice, funded by some Italian merchants, just exploded under the leadership of a guy named Brother Gerard. He was so good at what he did that in 1113, the Pope himself took the hospital under his direct protection. Now, this was a total game changer. It basically made them a sovereign power, like their own little state, accountable only to Rome.
And this is where they have their first big transformation. You see, the world outside their hospital walls was, well, dangerous. It wasn't enough to just heal pilgrims if those pilgrims couldn't even make it to the hospital safely. So they made a radical decision. They added the sword to the cross. They became warrior monks.
And that famous emblem you see, the 8-pointed cross, that became the perfect symbol of this new dual identity. The 8 points stood for the 8 Beatitudes, to be merciful, to be a peacemaker, to be pure in heart. It was a constant reminder of their core mission, even as they were becoming this absolutely fearsome military force.
So, fast forward to 1291. The Crusader kingdoms fall, and the knights are kicked out of the Holy Land. You'd think, that's it, right? Game over? Nope. Facing extinction, they didn't just give up. Instead, they took to the sea, conquered the island of Rhodes, and completely reinvented themselves as a sovereign naval power.
Now, how do you fund a new island nation? Well, they used a practice called the corso. Think of it as religiously sanctioned privateering. To the knights, it was a holy war against enemy shipping. To their enemies, well, you can imagine, they just called it piracy. But this controversial activity made them incredibly wealthy and feared all across the Mediterranean.
So how do you manage an army of knights from all over Europe who all speak different languages? They came up with this brilliant system called the langue. Knights were grouped by their native language, the langue of Italy, the langue of Germany, and so on. Each group was led by a senior knight and given a key government job. And here's the genius part. Each langue was responsible for defending a specific section of the city walls. It was a masterstroke, really. It created this powerful sense of unity through a mix of national pride and some fierce friendly competition. And from this island fortress for 2 whole centuries, the knights just dominated the Eastern Mediterranean. They were a real thorn in the side of the rising Ottoman Empire, which, as you can guess, was setting the stage for one of the most epic showdowns in history.
After a massive, brutal siege in 1522, the knights were finally driven from Rhodes. So now they're homeless again, and they're given a new island, a barren, sun-scorched rock called Malta. And it was here that they would face their absolute defining moment. I have to imagine the knights were not exactly thrilled with their new digs. Emperor Charles V grants them Malta for a symbolic annual rent, 1 single live falcon. I mean, can you imagine? After the lush green island of Rhodes, this barren rock must have felt like a bit of an insult. But hey, it was all they had.
And then, in 150-65, the storm arrived. The Ottoman Empire sent this enormous invasion force to just wipe the knights out, once and for all. For nearly 4 months, the island became a living hell. Fort St. Elmo fell in an absolute slaughter, but the main strongholds, Burgu and Singlia, they just held on by a thread, fighting off attack after brutal attack.
And let's just pause on the numbers here, because they're insane. Fewer than 9,000 defenders, and that's a mix of knights, mercenaries, and local Maltese civilians, stood against an imperial army of more than 40,000. This wasn't just a battle. It was a true David and Goliath struggle.
Their leader, the 70-year-old Grand Master Jean de Valette, he framed the battle in these stark, existential terms. He told his knights this wasn't just a fight for an island, it was a clash of civilizations, and they were the last line of defense for Europe.
And somehow, against all logic, they won. The Ottomans retreated in complete disarray.
The news electrified Europe. This tiny band of defenders on a barren rock had done the impossible. They had shattered the myth of Ottoman invincibility. So, after pulling off this incredible victory, their future on Malta was secure. They weren't just a garrison anymore, they were the rulers of a state, and they immediately got to work building a capital city worthy of their new legendary status.
Right on the very peninsula where Ottoman cannons had been pounding them, they built a new city, Valletta. And it was a masterpiece of military engineering, a fortress city with a modern grid plan, designed from the ground up to be totally impregnable.
But here's what's so amazing. Even as these warrior princes, they never forgot where they came from. In Valletta, they built the Sacra Infirmaria, which was hands down one of the finest hospitals in the world. We're talking individual beds for patients and meals served on silver plates for hygiene. It was a huge testament to their founding vow to care for our lords the sick. Their reign in Malta came to a surprisingly quick end. In 1798, Napoleon showed up. The Knights had rules against fighting other Christians, and they were internally divided. They surrendered without a single shot fired. And just like that, the age of the warrior monk was over. Once again, they were homeless and totally without a purpose.
And this brings up the ultimate existential question, right? After centuries defined by warfare, what does a military order do when there are no more wars for it to fight? Was this finally the end of the line?
No, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of their most profound reinvention yet. The order would now go back to the single powerful idea that had started it all 9 centuries earlier. Stripped of their land, stripped of their military role, they moved their headquarters to Rome. And there they completed their journey, coming completely full circle. They laid down the sword for good and picked up the cross, dedicating themselves 100% to humanitarian work.
And their scale today is just staggering. They're still a sovereign entity in international law, but now their territory is the entire globe. With thousands of members and volunteers in 120 countries, they're on the front lines of disasters and health crises everywhere. They've become a true humanitarian superpower.
From healers in Jerusalem, to sea lords in Rhodes, to the heroes of Malta, and now a global aid organization, their story is just one of relentless, brilliant adaptation. And it leaves us with one final, fascinating question. What on earth will the next reinvention of this incredible 900-year-old order look like?